Jennifer and Garrett's love story had begun 12 years earlier, in the fall of 2010, at a meeting in Nashville. Jennifer, then a bright-eyed real estate intern, had been tasked with selling raffle tickets. Garrett, fresh out of graduate school and working for a tech startup, found himself drawn to her infectious laugh and ambitious spirit. Their courtship was a whirlwind of coffee dates, weekend hikes, and long conversations about their dreams for the future. Jennifer admired Garrett's intellect and drive, while Garrett was captivated by Jennifer's determination and zest for life. Within a year, they were engaged, and 6 months later, they exchanged vows in a picturesque ceremony overlooking the mountains. The early years of their marriage were marked by hard work and shared goals. Jennifer threw herself into her real estate career, quickly climbing the ranks at her firm. Her natural charm and keen eye for property potential made her a favorite among clients. She had a knack for matching families with their dream homes, a talent that brought her both professional success and personal satisfaction. Garrett's career in software engineering flourished in parallel. His innovative approach to problem-solving caught the attention of industry leaders, and he soon found himself in high demand. Late nights spent coding gave way to leadership roles and speaking engagements at tech conferences. As their careers soared, so did their personal life. They bought their home in Oakwood Estates, a spacious 4-bedroom house that Jennifer had fallen in love with at first sight. Weekends were spent renovating, decorating, and turning the house into a home that reflected their shared tastes and aspirations. To the outside world, Jennifer and Garrett appeared to have it all. They hosted dinner parties where Jennifer's culinary skills shone, and Garrett's dry humor kept guests entertained. They took exotic vacations, posting enviable photos of sunsets in Bali and ski trips in the Swiss Alps. Their social media feeds were a carefully curated showcase of their seemingly perfect life. Yet, as the years passed, subtle cracks began to form in their foundation. The long hours devoted to their respective careers left little time for the passion that had once defined their relationship. Conversations about starting a family were repeatedly postponed, with both citing the need to achieve just one more professional milestone before taking that step. Still, they soldiered on, convinced that their love and shared history would be enough to weather any storm. Neither Jennifer nor Garrett could have predicted the tempest that was about to engulf their lives, threatening to destroy everything they had built together. Fiona Maroney's arrival in Oakwood brought a fresh energy to the neighborhood. At 33, she was starting over after a painful divorce, determined to rebuild her life on her own terms. With her infectious laugh, Fiona stood out among the more conservative residents of the suburb. It was Jennifer who first reached out to Fiona, dropping by with a welcome basket filled with local treats and a bottle of wine. The two women hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared love of art and travel. Jennifer, who had always harbored a secret desire to be more creative, was fascinated by Fiona's stories of teaching art to middle schoolers and her own artistic pursuits. As winter melted into spring, Fiona became a regular fixture at the Hartley home. She and Jennifer would spend weekends exploring local galleries or trying out new recipes in Jennifer's gourmet kitchen. Garrett, initially content to let the women have their girl time, found himself increasingly drawn into their conversations, particularly when Fiona would discuss the latest exhibits at the museum where she volunteered. Fiona's presence seemed to breathe new life into the Hartley's social circle. Her quick wit and adventurous spirit added a spark to their dinner parties. She introduced the couple to new restaurants, dragged them to outdoor concerts, and even convinced the usually reserved Garrett to try salsa dancing. For Jennifer, Fiona represented a kind of freedom she had never allowed herself. She admired her friend's ability to reinvent herself after her divorce, to pursue her passions without apology. In Fiona, Jennifer saw a road not taken, a life lived with more spontaneity and less concern for others' expectations. Garrett, too, found himself looking forward to Fiona's visits. Her perspective on art and culture opened up new avenues of conversation, a welcome change from the work-related discussions that had come to dominate his interactions with Jennifer. He appreciated Fiona's ability to draw him out of his shell, to make him see the world through fresh eyes. None of them realized that this newfound friendship was setting the stage for a betrayal that would shatter their lives forever. The seeds of the affair were sown on a balmy evening in late April. Jennifer was out of town for a real estate conference, and Garrett had invited Fiona over for dinner, not wanting to eat alone. As they sat together, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset, something shifted in the air between them. Fiona, feeling bold from the wine and the intimate setting, began to open up about her failed marriage. She spoke of feeling unloved, unappreciated, and ultimately unwanted. Garrett, moved by her vulnerability, found himself sharing his own feelings of disconnection within his marriage. The long hours, the focus on career advancement, the gradual fading of passion all tumbled out in a rush of confession. In that moment of shared loneliness, their eyes met, and the spark that had been smoldering burst into flame. The first kiss was hesitant, almost chaste, but it quickly deepened into something more urgent, more primal. Guilt and desire warred within both of them, but desire won out. That night marked the beginning of their clandestine relationship. In the weeks that followed, Garrett and Fiona constructed an elaborate web of lies to conceal their affair. They stole moments together whenever they could. Lunch breaks spent in secluded corners of parks, fake work events that provided cover for rendezvous at out-of-town hotels, early morning meetings that were really hurried encounters in Fiona's art studio. The affair brought a renewed sense of excitement to both their lives. For Garrett, Fiona represented passion and spontaneity, qualities he felt had been lacking in his life with Jennifer. He reveled in Fiona's artistic nature, the way she saw beauty in the everyday world. For Fiona, Garrett offered stability and intellectual stimulation, a stark contrast to her ex-husband's volatility and disinterest in her work. Yet, even as they reveled in their newfound connection, the weight of their deception hung heavy. There were close calls, a lipstick stain hastily wiped from Garrett's collar, a text message not deleted quickly enough, unexplained absences that required increasingly complex explanations. One particularly close call came during a neighborhood barbecue. As Jennifer chatted with other guests, Garrett and Fiona found themselves alone in the kitchen. Unable to resist, they shared a passionate kiss, only to spring apart at the sound of approaching footsteps. It was Dominic coming to refill his drink. He gave them an odd look but said nothing, leaving Garrett and Fiona to wonder if he had seen anything. As spring turned to summer, the affair intensified. Garrett and Fiona began to talk about a future together, even as guilt gnawed at them both. They knew they were playing with fire, but neither seemed able or willing to put an end to it. Little did they know that their carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down around them. The first inkling that something was amiss came to Jennifer on a sunny Saturday morning in early June. She had woken early, intending to surprise Garrett with breakfast in bed, only to find his side of the bed empty and cold. His running shoes were by the door, but his car was gone from the driveway. When Garrett returned an hour later, flushed and slightly out of breath, he claimed he had gone for a long run and then driven to pick up fresh bagels. Jennifer nodded, accepting his explanation, but a small seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer began to notice other small changes in Garrett's behavior. He was more attentive than usual, bringing her flowers for no reason and suggesting date nights out of the blue. Yet at the same time, he seemed distant, often lost in thought, his fingers constantly hovering over his phone as if waiting for a message. Garrett's work hours became erratic. He began coming home later, citing project deadlines and client meetings. But when Jennifer casually mentioned his late nights to a colleague of Garrett's at a social event, the colleague seemed confused, saying things had been relatively quiet at the office lately. Even Garrett's scent seemed different to Jennifer. One night, as she leaned in to kiss him hello, she caught a whiff of an unfamiliar perfume. When she commented on it, Garrett laughed it off, saying he must have picked it up from the crowded elevator at work. Jennifer tried to dismiss her growing unease, telling herself she was being paranoid. After all, this was Garrett. Her Garrett, the man she had built a life with, the man she trusted implicitly. And yet the doubts persisted, nagging at her in quiet moments. She found herself watching Garrett more closely, noting how his eyes would light up when Fiona entered a room, the way their conversations seemed to exclude everyone else. She told herself it was natural. Fiona was their friend, of course Garrett enjoyed her company. But a voice in the back of Jennifer's mind whispered that there was more to it than that. As June wore on, Jennifer's suspicions grew stronger. She began to check Garrett's phone when he was in the shower, scroll through his emails when he left his laptop open. She knew it was wrong, a violation of his privacy, but she couldn't help herself. She needed to know the truth, even as she dreaded what she might find. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Jennifer made a decision. She would follow Garrett and see for herself what he was hiding. Little did she know that her world was about to shatter into a million pieces. On the sweltering afternoon of June 14th, Jennifer's suspicions finally reached a breaking point. Garrett had announced over breakfast that he had a late meeting and wouldn't be home for dinner. A quick call to his office confirmed what Jennifer had begun to suspect. There was no meeting scheduled. Heart pounding, palms sweating, Jennifer decided to follow Garrett. She called in sick to work, something she had never done before, and parked her car a block away from their house. As Garrett's car pulled out of the driveway, Jennifer followed at a discreet distance, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. To her surprise, Garrett headed not towards the city, but to a quiet, tree-lined street on the other side of town. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat as she realized where they were. She watched, a sick feeling growing in her stomach as Garrett parked his car and walked briskly to Fiona's front door. Fiona answered almost immediately, pulling Garrett inside with a smile that Jennifer could see even from her vantage point down the street. The door closed, and Jennifer sat in her car numb with shock. She had suspected, yes, but seeing it with her own eyes was something else entirely. Unable to bear the thought of what might be happening inside, Jennifer got out of her car on shaky legs. She approached Fiona's house, her mind a whirl of confusion and anger. Through a gap in the living room curtains, she saw them. Garrett and Fiona locked in a passionate embrace, oblivious to the world around them. The sight hit Jennifer like a physical blow. She staggered back, a strangled sob escaping her lips. In that moment, her entire world crumbled around her. Every memory, every shared dream, every promise of forever. All of it was tainted now, corrupted by the betrayal she had just witnessed. Blinded by tears, Jennifer stumbled back to her car. She sat there for what felt like hours, alternating between gut-wrenching sobs and periods of numb disbelief. When Jennifer finally drove home, her mind was racing. She couldn't confront Garrett yet. She needed time to think, to plan. But Fiona, the thought of her former friend going about her day, smug in her betrayal, made Jennifer's blood boil. Before she could talk herself out of it, Jennifer found herself driving to Fiona's house. She parked across the street waiting. When Fiona emerged to water her front garden, Jennifer was out of her car in a flash. Fiona's eyes widened in surprise and then fear as she saw Jennifer approaching, her face a mask of fury. What followed was a confrontation that would be seared into both women's memories forever. A maelstrom of accusations, denials, and finally, painful admissions that would set in motion a chain of events leading to tragedy. In the days following her confrontation with Fiona, Jennifer moved through her life like a ghost. She went through the motions at work, plastered on a smile for the neighbors, and maintained a facade of normalcy with Garrett. But inside she was seething, a cauldron of hurt and rage threatening to boil over at any moment. Jennifer had chosen not to confront Garrett immediately. She told herself it was because she needed time to think, to decide what she wanted to do. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was plotting her revenge. The idea came to her late one night as she lay awake, listening to Garrett's steady breathing beside her. If he could betray her with her best friend, why shouldn't she do the same to him? The thought of hurting Garrett the way he had hurt her brought a grim smile to Jennifer's face, and she knew exactly who she would use to execute her plan. Dominic Feldman, Garrett's best friend since college. Dominic had always been a fixture in their lives, the perpetual bachelor who flitted from one casual relationship to another. Jennifer had caught him looking at her appreciatively more than once over the years, though he had never acted on it out of respect for Garrett. As Jennifer's plan took shape, she began to pay more attention to Dominic. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on her when she wore a particularly flattering outfit, how he always seemed to position himself near her at social gatherings. Yes, Dominic would be perfect for what she had in mind. Jennifer started to engineer situations where she and Dominic would be alone together. She asked for his help with small household tasks when Garrett was out, invited him over for coffee to discuss a fitness plan. Each time she turned up the charm, letting her touches linger, laughing a little too hard at his jokes. As she set her plan in motion, Jennifer felt a twisted sense of justice. Soon, she thought, Garrett would know exactly how it felt to be betrayed by the two people he trusted most. The fact that her actions might hurt Dominic as well barely registered in her mind, consumed as she was by her need for vengeance. Little did Jennifer know that her carefully laid plans were about to backfire spectacularly, setting in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. On a sultry evening in late June, Jennifer put her plan into action. She had invited Dominic over under the pretense of needing help with a leaky faucet, knowing Garrett would be working late. She answered the door in a silk robe, her hair tousled, a glass of wine in hand. Dominic's eyebrows rose slightly at her appearance, but he maintained his usual friendly demeanor. As he worked on the faucet, Jennifer hovered nearby, peppering him with questions about his day, laughing at his jokes, and finding excuses to brush against him. When the job was done, Jennifer suggested they have a drink to cool off. She led Dominic to the living room, sitting close to him on the sofa. As they talked, she gradually steered the conversation towards relationships, lamenting the lack of passion in her marriage. Jennifer leaned in, her robe slipping open slightly. "Dominic, I've always wondered what it would be like between us," she murmured, her hand resting on his thigh. Dominic froze, his eyes wide with shock. He gently removed Jennifer's hand from his leg, putting some distance between them on the couch. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and concern. "You're my best friend's wife." Jennifer pressed on, desperation creeping into her voice. "Don't tell me you've never thought about it, Dominic. I've seen the way you look at me. We could keep it a secret. Garrett would never have to know." Dominic stood up abruptly. Humiliation washed over Jennifer as she watched Dominic gather his things. She had been so sure he would be receptive, so certain her plan would work. As he reached the door, Dominic turned back, his expression a mixture of pity and disappointment. "I won't mention this to Garrett," he said quietly, "but I think you two need to talk." The door closed behind him, leaving Jennifer alone with her shame and thwarted plans. She sank to the floor, tears of frustration and anger streaming down her face. How had everything gone so wrong? She had only wanted Garrett to feel the same pain she was feeling, to understand the depth of her hurt. As the initial shock of rejection faded, a new fear gripped Jennifer. Despite Dominic's assurance, she couldn't be certain he wouldn't tell Garrett about her attempted seduction. The thought of Garrett finding out, of him having the moral high ground despite his own betrayal, was unbearable. Little did Jennifer know that her worst fears were about to be realized, setting the stage for a confrontation that would end in tragedy. The following evening, Jennifer was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard Garrett's car pull into the driveway. Her hands shook slightly as she chopped vegetables, wondering if this would be the moment when everything came to a head. Garrett entered the house, his footsteps heavy, his greeting lacking its usual warmth. Jennifer's heart raced as she heard him approach the kitchen. When she turned to face him, the look in his eyes confirmed her worst fears. Dominic had told him everything. "Jennifer, we need to talk," Garrett said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "What the hell were you thinking, coming onto Dominic like that?" The knife clattered from Jennifer's hand onto the cutting board. "How dare you stand there and judge me when you've been screwing my best friend behind my back for months?" Garrett's face paled, his anger giving way to shock. "Did you think I was stupid? Did you think I wouldn't notice the late nights, the secret phone calls?" The argument escalated, years of unspoken resentments and frustrations pouring out. They rehashed old arguments, dredged up past hurts, each trying to wound the other as deeply as they had been wounded. As their shouting reached a fever pitch, Jennifer suddenly remembered the gun Garrett had insisted they keep in the house for protection, hidden in a lockbox in their bedroom closet. In that moment, clouded by rage and hurt, it seemed like the only way to make the pain stop. Without thinking, Jennifer sprinted up the stairs, Garrett calling after her in confusion. She fumbled with the lockbox, her hands shaking as she extracted the cold, heavy weapon. Garrett appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening as he saw the gun in Jennifer's trembling hands. Jennifer was beyond reason. All she could see was red. The red of her anger, the red of her pain, the red of the future she had lost. As Garrett took a step towards her, his hands raised in a placating gesture, Jennifer's finger tightened on the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the house, followed by a deafening silence. Time seemed to stand still in the aftermath of the gunshot. Jennifer stood frozen, the smoking gun still clutched in her shaking hands, as Garrett crumpled to the floor. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood that was quickly spreading across the beige carpet. For a moment, Jennifer couldn't process what had happened. She stared at Garrett's prone form, waiting for him to get up, to yell at her, to do anything. But he remained motionless, a dark stain blossoming on his chest. Jennifer's anguished scream pierced the quiet of the suburban evening. She gathered Garrett's lifeless body in her arms, rocking back and forth. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the blood that was soaking into her clothes. In the distance, She could hear the wail of sirens growing closer. A neighbor must have heard the gunshot and called the police. Jennifer knew she should run, should try to hide what she had done, but she couldn't bring herself to leave Garrett's side. As the sirens grew louder, Jennifer's mind raced through the events that had led to this moment. The happy years of her marriage, the gradual drift apart, the affair, her misguided attempt at revenge. It all seemed so trivial now in the face of what she had done. The front door burst open downstairs, and Jennifer could hear the heavy footsteps of police officers entering the house. The Hartley residence quickly transformed into a hive of activity as law enforcement descended upon the scene. Crime scene technicians meticulously combed through the house, photographing evidence and collecting samples. The bedroom, with its blood-stained carpet and discarded weapon, became the focal point of their investigation. Detective Ava Ramirez, a seasoned homicide investigator, took charge of the case. She found Jennifer in the living room, still in her blood-soaked clothes, her eyes vacant and her responses monosyllabic. Despite her state of shock, Jennifer was read her rights and taken into custody. At the police station, Jennifer's initial shock gave way to a flood of emotion. Between sobs, she confessed to shooting Garrett, recounting the events that led to that fatal moment. Detective Ramirez listened impassively, her pen scratching across her notepad as Jennifer poured out her story of betrayal, jealousy, and misguided revenge. As Jennifer's statement was being recorded, other officers were piecing together the puzzle. They interviewed neighbors who reported hearing the couple's argument escalating throughout the evening. Fiona Maroney was brought in for questioning, her tear-stained face a mask of guilt and grief as she confirmed her affair with Garrett. Dominic Feldman provided his own statement, reluctantly sharing the details of Jennifer's failed seduction attempt and his subsequent conversation with Garrett. His testimony painted a picture of a marriage in crisis, pushed to its breaking point by infidelity and misunderstanding. Forensic evidence corroborated Jennifer's confession. Gunshot residue was found on her hands, and the bullet extracted from Garrett's body matched the gun registered in his name. The courtroom was packed each day, filled with curious onlookers eager to witness the unfolding drama of love, betrayal, and murder. Prosecutor painted a damning picture of Jennifer as a woman consumed by jealousy and rage, who had coldly plotted revenge before resorting to murder. She emphasized the premeditated nature of Jennifer's actions, from her attempted seduction of Dominic to her retrieval of the gun during the argument. The testimony of Fiona Maroney proved to be a pivotal moment in the trial. Tearfully, she recounted her affair with Garrett, admitting to the pain and damage they had caused. Her evident remorse and guilt seemed to sway some jurors, lending credence to the defense's narrative of Jennifer as a wronged wife pushed too far. Dominic Feldman's testimony was equally impactful. He described Jennifer's unsuccessful attempt to seduce him, his voice thick with discomfort as he recounted the details. However, he also spoke of the deep love he had always observed between Jennifer and Garrett, suggesting that their actions were out of character for both of them. Throughout the trial, Jennifer sat quietly at the defense table, her once vibrant presence diminished by grief and regret. When she finally took the stand, her testimony was a heart-wrenching account of a marriage unraveled by miscommunication and betrayal. She expressed deep remorse for her actions, stating that she would gladly trade places with Garrett if she could. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, Judge Harriet Goodwin delivered Jennifer's fate. Taking into account the circumstances of the crime and Jennifer's lack of prior criminal history, she sentenced Jennifer to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. As Jennifer was led away in handcuffs, the tragic conclusion of a once happy marriage was complete. The cautionary tale of the Hartleys would long be remembered in Oakwood, a somber reminder of how quickly love can turn to hatred and how devastating the consequences of betrayal can be.